This is definitely our most asked question, is should we have a bigger grip? Should it be smaller? You know, how many overgrips should we be putting on? And this is what we're going to talk about right now. Players really struggle with gripping their racket. Now, I know this might sound obvious, but often players put too many on, or they don't put enough on, or they're not really sure what they should be looking for when they're putting on the overgrip. So today we're going to talk about what the pros do, and also what you should be doing and how you should be feeling your grip when you're playing your paddle. The first thing to say is that size does not matter. Yeah, this is something that all of the World Padel Tour players have a different preference. Juan Martin's grip is huge, like a tree trunk, and Maxi Sanchez's grip is so small, he takes off the factory grip and it's literally, you know, just the kind of product underneath. So it is mainly down to comfort. Now, I would say that if you've got an elbow or a shoulder injury, you don't want that grip too small, because often that's how people overgrip. You also don't want that grip too big, because then you end up having the same problem. Yeah, but when it comes to performance, there are players, you know, at the top level that have really thick grips, and there are also players at the top level that have really thin grips. So that won't affect the play as much as you think. Our next most common question is, why do all the players have white grips? And I think that that's really for two reasons. One is the white grip, it's kind of obvious when it's used, and you can see when it needs changing, easier than, say, a black grip or a different color. The other thing is, for some reason, and I don't know the answer to this, but the grip kind of is better performing, the white one, rather than the other colors. You know, even Wilson, which is the grip that I like to use, the performance grip, the white grip is better at kind of, you know, avoiding moisture than the black one, for example. And I can't tell you why that is, but it's quite commonly known among the top players that, you know, the white grip is better for performance. So now we'll go into a bit of a tutorial for putting on the grip. All of these grips, they come obviously with the sticky tape at the top, and I just kind of stick it to the racket so that you've got it for later. Make sure you unravel this, and then when you do this, make sure that you take the plastic off it. I know that might sound obvious, but I've seen lots of players that do not take the plastic layer on the top off, and therefore obviously it's not going to you know, be sweat resistant if the plastic is on the top. There is also, what you're going to find, a little bit of sticky right at the thin end. Yeah. So when you're looking at the racket, the grip, sorry, you've got a thin end and you've got a thick end. You will always start with the thin end. You're going to start with the adhesive on the back of the racket, and you're going to want to put that as close as possible to the top of the racket. Use your other thumb to hold that down, and then you're going to wrap that around the top of the grip. Now, one way that a lot of pro players wrap their racket is they like to make the bottom of the racket thicker. This is usually for players that like to have their hand more on the grip, as opposed to those that kind of use the grip with the hand slightly off. And if you're going to do that, you will wrap a few times round the bottom of the racket to make that quite thick. Yeah. If you don't want a thick bottom on the racket, then you will actually just kind of go straight in to rolling up the racket, and you want to make sure that you always pull this quite tight, because if it's loose it'll end up moving, you know, during your match, which is really frustrating. So you want to just make sure it's quite tight and you overlap slightly with the racket. Now, if you like a really thin racket, you will only overlap by 1 millimeter or 2. If you want it quite thick, you can have a big overlap, and most players use a tennis grip for this. Yeah, so they've got lots of space to play with, and you just basically move down the racket like so, overlapping slightly all the way to the bottom. Yeah. Once you come to the end of the racket, you can do as many pro players do, and they wrap it up the top of the racket like this. You even see players that are wrapping it, you know, round part of the throat like this. This is not necessary. I think they're just wanting to do that to finish off the grip. You can wrap it further up the racket, and a good reason to do this is if you use double hands, sometimes you can actually get that left hand also on the grip, and then you reach a point where you're at the top of the racket. Now, when you get to this point, you can either use scissors and make it nice and neat, or you can just pull the grip off and do it like that. That's what I normally do, and then I'll take the piece of adhesive, put my thumb on it, and then just wind that round so that it's sticking at the top of the grip. Yeah, and this is something that you then replace the rubber band so that it's over the top of the racket, and there we have a new grip. Yeah, I've done that so that I only overlap by a bit, so it only increased the thickness of my grip a little. If I want to increase it more, I would put another overgrip on. One thing to remember, if you are experimenting with the grip, remember that not only adding a grip adds weight to your racket, it'll add a few grams to the weight of your racket, it will also change the balance of your racket. So the more overgrips you put on the grip, obviously the more weight will be in the handle of the racket, therefore taking the balance away from the top end of the racket. Yeah? So if you're someone who likes a head-heavy racket and you're going to plan on putting a lot of grips on, just be aware of that when you're testing rackets and you're choosing your racket. And up here I'm going to put a video on how you should be testing your rackets, and that way we can find the best racket for you.